Hi, this is Sue for My Journey with Parkinson's. I did a blog recently about famous people with Parkinson's. Most of us, I suppose, when you have a condition like Parkinson's, you have sort of a radar where your ears prick up when you hear that other people also have Parkinson's, and particularly if they're well known. One of the most well known ones, of course, is Michael J. Fox. And he's done a lot for research for Parkinson's, and he's just my Parkinson's hero. But when I hear his name, I don't always just think immediately of Parkinson's. I think the first time you hear his name, well, I know for me, I think of him in Back to the Future. They were great films, and that's, I'm sure, what most people would think about when they hear the name Michael J. Fox. Billy Connolly, he's another famous person with Parkinson's. Now, your average person would know him as a stand-up comedian, as a real laugh of a guy who is well known for his humour, but also has been known because he has Parkinson's. But the first thing you think about when you think of Billy Connolly is not going to be Parkinson's, I'm sure. I remember one time when my mother-in-law was out visiting from England, we took her to one of his shows, and it didn't really occur to me when we thought about taking her there that he swore rather a lot. And I was watching my mother-in-law, and she seemed to be laughing along and enjoying the show, but my husband and I did look at each other a couple of times when a few sort of swear words were coming out from time to time, well, more than from time to time, quite frequently. And she didn't seem to be too offended, but then when we talked about it afterwards, she turned around and said something about the language not being necessary or something like that. But she did mention the language, so it didn't go past her after all like I thought it might have, because she did not have great hearing. She seemed to enjoy it, and we certainly enjoyed it, but it was a bit uncomfortable at times. I remember my mum particularly didn't like swearing, and I remember she never said the word bitch or used any of the really bad swear words, some of those other nasty words, but she used to make me laugh. She'd turn around and she'd say, "Oh, she's such a little twitch." And I think, gosh, you're going to say twitch, you may as well say bitch, mum. But it was the word she used, and it was when she was getting really hot under the collar about somebody that she would use that word of this person being a twitch. And it always used to amuse me. I'm sure she used that word in her head about me when I was a teenager on many occasions. So Michael J. Fox, Billy Connolly, Ozzy Osbourne. He was more known for his music and his stage antics on stage, and he was quite a memorable guy. They had the sort of fly on the wall series that looked at them as a rather quirky family, and I'm sure a lot of people would think of that when they think of him. But the point is that Ozzy Osbourne, Billy Connolly, Michael J. Fox, the first thing that you think about those people is not about them having Parkinson's, them being a person with Parkinson's. It's almost an afterthought, and some people wouldn't know and some people wouldn't care. The main thing is that they were known for what they did, not for what they had in the way of a condition. And I think that's the way that it should be. And I don't want my grandchildren to think of me as a person with Parkinson's first and foremost. I want them to think of me as Nana. I want my kids to think of me as Mum, and my husband to think of me as his wife. I do not want Parkinson's taking centre stage, top billing in my life and in my family's memories at any stage. So I have no worldwide claim to fame. I do my blog and my podcast and have followers, but there's not that many. It's just a humble little blog and humble little podcast that I do that help me with my Parkinson's, that help me to reach out to people to say, hey, this is the life that I'm leading with Parkinson's. It's still a good life. I'm still having a happy life. And, you know, there are times when things get you down. There are times when things become a bit overwhelming. But most of the time, I'm happy. I'm happy with my husband. I'm very happy with my husband. I'm happy with my children, my grandchildren, the friends that I've been making when we moved into our new house. Life is happier more often than not. And we have these little blips in our lives. We all do, of course we do. But for the most part, I'm happy. So I'm not famous, but like I used to say, or we used to say as a family, at best I could claim to be a legend in my own lunchtime. And that's a phrase that we used to use often as kids. And I have some things that I hope are my claims to fame for my family. I want to be remembered as the mum that read bedtime stories to my children and tucked them in and made them feel safe. I don't know who enjoyed reading the books more, my children or myself. And it was a nice way to end the day with my children, to sit there and read them a book. And I remember my oldest son, Adam, we had a Sesame Street book that was called I Can Do It Myself. And it was full of things that this child could do themselves, that they'd learnt to do. And it's like, I can tie my own shoelaces. I can do it myself. And Adam, when we read that book, I'd say to him, I can tie my own shoelaces, I can. And he would go, do it myself. And it was really cute, and I loved that storybook. And we read that many times. But yeah, reading to a child at bedtime is just lovely when they're all tucked up and fresh and clean, probably from the bath, and waiting for that story. So those are the sort of memories that I like to hang on to, and I hope they do too. Now, parenting is a difficult thing, and children don't come with an instruction manual, and I did my fair share of making mistakes. I was young when I had my first child. I was only 20, and I definitely made a lot of mistakes. And my oldest son, used to say he was my practice baby, and he was. It's a miracle that we both survived his childhood, really, as I bumbled through on sleepless nights with a colicky child. But we got through, and I went on to have his two siblings, his brother and his sister. But there were some days where I found that my children, or one of the children, would just be a little bit of a ratbag all day, just doing naughty things and just left, right and centre. And some days you felt like you were telling them off all day and grumpy with them all day, and just weren't getting on. And I used to put the kids to bed and tuck them in, kiss them goodnight. And I made a particular effort when we'd had a day like that to sit there with them and say, look, we haven't got on so well today. I haven't loved your behaviour today, but I will always love you. And I made a point of saying that because I hated the thought that they would go to bed thinking that Mummy hated them because I'd yelled at them all day. I needed them to know it was the behaviour I didn't like, not them, that they were always loved, and I made sure that they knew that. When I was on my own, especially when I first moved down here to Christchurch to do my studies, to get my degree, we didn't have much money and we couldn't really afford takeaways, but sometimes if I could scrape up a couple of dollars, I would cook some cheap sausages in the oven, and then we'd go down to the fish and chip shop and get $2 worth of chips and brought them home. And in those days, $2 worth of hot chips was quite a bit, actually. It would be next to nothing now. And so we'd bring them home in the paper and open up the steaming paper full of crispy chips, and we'd get the sausages out of the oven and we'd put them on the paper and put sort of puddles of sauce all around on the paper, and we'd sit in front of the heater and have a picnic on the floor and have our little takeaway. And I used to love that. I'm sure the kids did too, and I hope they remember that. To me, it was one of those special moments. And there's lots of special moments when you have kids, but you have a chance to kind of do it all again when you have grandchildren, but in a different way, as somebody who has grown up with their children, who can look back on the things that they did or didn't do with their own children and do them differently, because you're in a different position. You don't have to be the disciplinarian. You don't have to keep them in line. You don't have to help them with their homework. You don't have to make sure that they're fed and clothed all the time, all the responsible things that a parent must do. And one of the main things that I have loved doing with my grandchildren is baking, and we have always loved baking together. And unfortunately, my grandsons all live in the North Island, so we haven't had a chance to do baking together, but their turn will come. And I've compiled a clear file full of recipes that I've been baking with the girls, and I will use that same file when it comes to the boys having their turn at baking with Nana. And I quickly learned from my granddaughters that trying to do one thing in the way of baking with 3 kids helping was a nightmare. There were arguments over who was going to stir stuff, who was going to put stuff in, who was going to lick the bowl, all that sort of stuff. So we started doing individual baking for each child. So each child got to have one-on-one with me in the kitchen. And it was a really nice time. It was when you have 3 granddaughters and it's hard to get them one-on-one sometimes. It was my time to spend with each child as an individual, and we would chat and we would laugh and we'd talk about the baking, and I'd teach them some basic maths with measuring ingredients and stuff like that. And we've have lots of laughter, and having them one-on-one was really nice because, yeah, you got to give them that individual attention. And I remember the youngest one coming in when I was starting to bake with one of her sisters, and she walked in and she stood there smiling at us, and I said, "Can I help you, darling?" And she said, "I just wanted to see what you guys are doing." And I said, "Well, we're just baking together, darling." And I said, "And it's your sister's turn right now, and so you go into the lounge and do your colouring in or your puzzles or watch a bit of telly and just leave us to sort of have our one-on-one time." And I said, "And I promise when it's your turn, your sisters won't come in the kitchen either, and we can have that one-on-one time." And that was important to me, and I think it was important to them, that we have that memory of Nana taking the time to make sure each child got to have their time with Nana when they were baking. And the funny thing is, when my children, like my daughter who's the parent of these 3 beautiful girls, and my son, and my oldest son as well, of course, when I baked for them when they were younger, I never used to let them help. I just didn't have the time. I'd make about 4 different things, and I just didn't have the time to have children help me. So there's less pressure when you're a grandmother or a nana, as I am, to have to do things and fit things in around all your responsibilities raising children. So yeah, baking with the kids has been a wonderful thing, and I've really enjoyed it. In fact, as they've got older, I haven't done it for quite a while, and I miss it. I really do miss it. A couple of the granddaughters like my spa pool. I have a spa pool at home, which is so good in winter when it's cold, and get into a lovely hot pool with the steam coming off it and look at the stars. And a couple of the girls like to come in with me, and again I try and work out a way that I can spend one-on-one time with the kids and say, "Hey, what's happening in your life? Tell me about school, tell me about your friends, tell me what you've been up to." And again, there's that one-on-one time, that feeling that I want to give them, that I'm interested in their lives and I want to know what's happening with them. And I've had some really good conversations. You get children away from screens, away from televisions, away from cell phones, all that sort of stuff. And we might listen to a little bit of music, but basically we go out there and we chill and we relax and we laugh and we talk and we share stories, and it's great. So there are so many things that I've done with my grandchildren and my children over the years together, and I hope that they have some lovely memories of those times with us, with bushwalks and picnics and ice creams at the beach, making sandcastles, splashing in puddles at the beach, all those sorts of things. And then of course there's my husband. Now we have many lovely memories together. We've travelled. I never travelled before we got together. I'd never left New Zealand, but I've been lucky enough to be able to go overseas a couple of times with him. And we have got some lovely memories of those times, both just the 2 of us and when we've caught up with family over in the UK, friends over in the UK. And I don't take for granted that we're able to do this. We both work really hard, and I got my degree, and we need to keep in touch with the family in England and enjoy our trips over there. But the thing is, just like the famous people with Parkinson's that I mentioned earlier, Billy and Michael and Muhammad Ali is another one, John Walker, a well-known New Zealand runner. They have a certain degree of fame and they're known for being something or someone that acts or sings or dances or does whatever they do in the public arena. But I'm sure their children, their family members, their siblings, their parents, they won't value the public persona of that person that is special to them. They will remember the things like stories being told, fun times at the beach, laughing and joking together as a family around a meal table. Those are the things that we hold on to. Those are the things that are precious memories that we hold on to. And I'm sure the fact that they're a famous person to other people in the world probably doesn't really matter. They are their parent, their friend, their cousin, their family member. Whatever they are within that family is what's important to those family members, not any apparent famousness, if there is such a word. And the way I look at it is, sure, you may do some amazing things with your life and be well known for it, and then you have a diagnosis of Parkinson's. But it's a bit like when I was talking to somebody in the family about doing my degree course, and I said it was a 4-year course, and they went, 4 years, that's a long time. And I said, not really. I said, Rose, on one hand it's a reasonable amount of time, but when you think about it, 4 years to give myself and my children a better future, it's well worth it. And it's a drop in the ocean when compared with the rest of our lives. And it was, and it didn't seem to take that long to go by. So it's like with this diagnosis, I don't want it to take over my life. I don't want my life and me to be all about Parkinson's. That the first thing people think about is that I have Parkinson's or had Parkinson's. It really is a minor part of my life. Sure, it's going to have a significant impact on that life at some point, but it is not everything that I'm about. Even if we have it for 20 years or more, it still doesn't cancel out the 50-odd years that we had before it came on the scene. To me, I don't want it to take centre stage. I don't want it to be the first thing that people think about. If somebody says to my grandkids, what do you remember about Nana? What do you remember about your mum? I don't want them to say, oh, she had Parkinson's and this is what it was like for her. I want them to say, I loved baking with her. I loved going to the beach with her. I loved paddling around in the rock pools. I loved her pushing me on the swing, reading me stories, playing Jenga, and, playing silly games together. That's what I want my children to remember me for. That's what I want to be famous for. I want to be famous for the memories and the experiences that we have shared together. And I hope that they don't really think about my Parkinson's, that it's a minor issue that they can look past because they love me, that it's not the most important thing about me, that the love that we share, the memories that we share is far more important than some stupid diagnosis that wasn't invited into our lives, certainly wasn't invited into mine. And yeah, I want to be famous for being me, for being Nana, for being Mum, for being there for my children, for my grandchildren, and for having fun and making really good memories together. That's what I want to be famous for in the family. So please don't allow Parkinson's to be the thing that you're remembered for. If anyone asks my grandchildren what memories they have of me, I hope they say, I loved baking with Nana, or she always read us stories and wrote poems. If someone mentions my Parkinson's, I hope they say, oh yeah, that, and brush aside any further comments with the disdain the diagnosis deserves. This has been Sue for My Journey with Parkinson's. Kia kaha, be brave, be strong, be you.